Israel reneged on its obligations, and then Israel patiently waited. It waited until our election day, November 4th, when the attention of the media and the public was riveted to the result of the historic election. And on that day, Israel went into Gaza, and it killed several Palestinian militants, knowing full well and wanting the ceasefire to break down. Because for many months, indeed for more than a year, it had planned an attack on Gaza, and it needed the pretext, and it created the pretext on November 4th. The ceasefire broke down, but you know these Islamic fundamentalists, these lunatics, irrational, crazy, unpredictable, whatever. Well, Hamas, it kept saying till the end of December, we want to renew the ceasefire. We want to renew the ceasefire. But Israel has to implement its obligation to end the blockade. Israel said no. Hamas had to unilaterally and unconditionally stop the rocket fire, but Israel would not lift the blockade. By December 2008, Sarah Roy of Harvard University, the world's leading authority in Gaza's economy, she wrote, "The breakdown of an entire society is happening in front of us in Gaza, but there is little international response beyond UN warnings which are ignored." The breakdown of an entire society in Gaza is happening before our eyes, and nobody cares. And now Hamas was confronted with two stark options. One, to allow the Palestinians to gradually acquiesce in their incremental starvation, or to fight and resist. Hamas chose the second option, although its resistance was largely symbolic. The former Israeli commander in Gaza, a fellow by the name of Shmuel Zakai, he said, speaking to the Israelis, he said, "You cannot just land blows, leave the Palestinians in Gaza in economic distress, and expect that Hamas will just sit around and do nothing." During the invasion, Hamas leader Khaled Mishal, he wrote, "Our modest homemade rockets, they are our cry of protest to the world." And in fact, what were those rocket attacks, if not a message being transmitted to an indifferent world? SOS, we're dying. SOS, we're dying. It's easy enough to condemn the Hamas rocket attacks, and all the human rights organizations did so. But still, it seems to me, in condemning them, you still have an obligation to say, what should they have done? What was their other option? If you don't present another option, you're in effect saying that the people of Gaza had a legal and moral obligation to just lie still and die. Israel decided, however, to expedite the process. On December 27th, it invaded Gaza and stayed there for 22 days. Now, what happened in Gaza during those 22 days? Nowadays, when you read references to those 22 days. They typically refer to the Gaza War, the war in Gaza. Even reputable human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch, in their recent report, they referred in the title to the Gaza War. And the Israelis were also emphatic that they had fought a war in Gaza. In fact, they said if there was death and destruction in Gaza, it was because Israel had to fight an asymmetrical war against the Hamas terrorists. They said everybody knows in war there's lots of confusion. You have to make split-second decisions. And if inevitably, if regrettably, innocents get killed and civilian targets get hit, that's inevitable. It's war. It's what's called the fog of war. But was there a war in Gaza? After the 22 days, the Israelis were very pleased with themselves. They went around boasting, now we've shown the Arabs who's who and what's what. We've put the uppity natives in line. Because Israel was very upset after the July-August 2000 war in Lebanon, when it suffered a major military defeat at the hands of the Party of God, the Hezbollah. And the Sheikh Nasrallah, the head of the Party of God, he went around saying to Israel, taunting Israel, we're not afraid of you anymore. The Arabs are not afraid of you anymore. Go ahead, attack again, and if you attack again, we'll defeat you again. And now Israel was upset because it said its deterrence capacity had been undermined. Whenever you hear these polysyllabic phrases coined by political science professors like deterrence capacity, it's supposed to convey the notion that they know something that you don't know, which in fact is very rarely the case, and it's usually the reverse. Deterrence capacity, all it means is the Arab world's fear of Israel. And Israel was very worried that its deterrence capacity had been undermined because of its defeat in Lebanon. But after Gaza, the Israelis said, we've restored our deterrence capacity because we won the war in Gaza. We've shown the Arabs that we're a fighting force again because we won the war in Gaza. But along came an Israeli strategic analyst, and he said, speaking to his fellow citizens, it is very dangerous for Israel to believe it won the war in Gaza when there was no war. In reality, not a single battle was fought during the 22 days of fighting. A former Israeli military official, he said there was no war. Hamas sat in its bunkers and came out when it was all over. Well, there was no war in Gaza. What did happen in Gaza? On the military plane, it's fairly straightforward. Israel began its assault with what it called the air phase of the war. That is, it sent in the course of the 22 days, it flew about 2,800 to 3,000 combat missions over Gaza. Every plane returned, none was downed. In fact, none was even damaged, which is not altogether surprising because the Palestinians had no anti-aircraft defenses to speak of. At the beginning of the second week, January 3rd, Israel launched its ground and air assault on Gaza. The Israeli soldiers were equipped with special night fighting technology. Hamas couldn't even see them, let alone fight.